The wall surrounding the old Black Creek Cremation Ground isn't made of stone. It's a 100-yard stretch of hardened, compacted ash, rising 10 feet high, perpetually warm to the touch. It's less a boundary and more a physical manifestation of a concentrated century-old burn. They say the ground is haunted not by ghosts, but by the relentless, consuming heat of the pyres. Elias, a journalist chasing an obscure local legend, climbed the wall at midnight, the dry, smoky air feeling unnaturally heavy. He was here for the story of the Ascetic, a hermit who reportedly lived inside the grounds for 40 years, never speaking, surviving only on offerings left at the wall. As Elias dropped into the compound, the sound of his boots on the ash-covered ground was instantly muffled, swallowed by the profound silence. He moved toward the center, where the air shimmered above a single massive circular depression, the communal pyre pit. There was no fire, but the pit radiated an intense, dry heat, smelling strongly of sulfur and rendered fat. He checked his thermal camera. The pit glowed a furious, pulsing white. As Elias aimed his camera into the pit, a faint, rhythmic clink, clink, clink started coming from the deepest shadows, the sound of tiny, hard objects being agitated. He adjusted his focus and saw a small clay bowl near the edge, filled with what looked like dried rice. A hand, skeletal and wrapped in saffron cloth, reached out and gently tapped the bowl, causing the rice grains to make the clink, clink, clink sound. The Ascetic. The figure was seated, cross-legged, facing the pyre pit, his body unnaturally thin, almost mummified, his skin the color of deep ash. Elias held his breath, raising his voice only slightly. "Are you the Ascetic? I have questions." The figure did not move, but the clink, clink, clink stopped instantly. A low, dry voice, like sand shifting over stone, finally spoke, emanating from the center of the figure's chest. "I am the guard. The heat demands silence. It demands its payment." Then, the figure raised its head. Where the eyes should have been, there were only two perfect circular pools of clear distilled oil reflecting the faint moonlight like liquid glass. Elias, frozen by the sight of the oil-filled eyes, felt a sudden, sharp, burning pain on his forearm. He looked down and saw a crimson, blistering welt forming, the distinct outline of a handprint. The air temperature spiked, and the thermal camera in his hand began to shriek, turning a uniform, violent red. The Ascetic was not merely a hermit. He was the keeper and an instrument of the cremation ground's malevolent heat. The figure rose slowly, its movements stiff and agonizing, the saffron cloth falling away to reveal skin that looked like hardened, cracked earth. The dry voice whispered, now laced with a triumphant, sibilant hiss. "You have trespassed. You have brought your warmth across the ash wall. The dead is yours." As the Ascetic took a slow, deliberate step toward Elias, the surrounding ash ground began to bubble and smoke, the faint smell of sulfur intensifying. Elias's boots began to sink slightly into the hot, shifting earth, the heat from the ground burning through the soles. The clink, clink, clink returned, now coming from a leather pouch tied to the Ascetic's waist, the sound of tiny, loose bones rattling. Elias broke the trance, scrambling backward and heading for the ash wall he had just climbed. The Ascetic did not run, but his presence was a crushing wave of heat and dread, making the air around Elias shimmer and buckle. The dry voice followed him, sounding closer than it should have. "You cannot outrun the fire in the ground. It consumes the warmth of the living to fuel the silence of the dead." Elias realized the wall wasn't a barrier. It was a containment field, and by crossing it, he had offered his own vitality to the cursed soil. He reached the base of the ash wall, his skin flushed and slick with sweat. He clutched the rough surface, his hands sinking slightly into the compacted material. As he climbed, a low, wet, furious sound erupted from the deepest part of the pyre pit. A sound of liquid boiling over rock, and a thin geyser of superheated black smoke shot into the air. The Ascetic was at the base of the wall, reaching up with his mummified hands, the oil in his eye sockets blazing white-hot. With a final, desperate lunge, Elias vaulted over the ash wall and tumbled down the exterior slope, hitting the cooler, sandy ground outside the compound. He didn't look back until he was across the main road. The cremation ground was now wreathed in a massive plume of black, sulfurous smoke, and the entire ash wall was glowing a furious deep orange, pulsating with intense heat. The sound of the boiling liquid was replaced by a final, horrifying, high-pitched screaming, the sound of human tissue being instantly flash-vaporized. Elias saw the Ascetic, standing perfectly still atop the wall, a silhouetted sentinel against the furious glow. The figure was no longer reaching out. It was simply standing guard, its body steaming faintly, and as Elias watched, he saw the Ascetic's arm lift slowly, deliberately, as if to place a small, new object into the clay bowl at his feet. The final offering was complete, and the heat demanded more. The wall was secure, and the debt had been paid with a fresh sacrifice of heat. Subscribe to WhisperDark for more.